Hello everybody, today I am going to show you two ways that you can actually shade in, color, or paint with your ink pads, two different types of inks. First thing I'm going to do is actually stamp out my images. Now what makes this work is the fact that we're going to be embossing. In my new craft space, or my temporary craft space I should say, I don't have an area in which you can watch me emboss, so I have to take it into the kitchen. So I can tell you how I do it. But anyway, first thing, you want to use a little static pouch. I have mine on a clip. That way I don't have to get my fingers all powdery and dusty. Lay it out on a Misty. I like using a Misty on this just because if I happen to not get a clear stamped image, I can go back through and do it one more time. My favorite embossing pad is actually the Wow clear embossing pad. I've never ever had a problem with this ink pad before, whereas others I have. This one does it evenly. I don't have too much or too little. It's perfect. And then I'm just going over with some black embossing powder. The other thing I like about this is since I don't have my heat gun right next to me and I have to go into the kitchen, I want to get all of my powder laid out and then do it kind of all at once. And this allows me to do so because it stays wet with the powder nicely. So I don't have to worry about it drying too fast before I can get it into the kitchen. Now I am using Lovely Legs, two different Halloween stamp sets from Colorado Craft Company. I'll try to get them down for you below. I have been having a hard time finding direct links to their stuff, but I will do my best to make sure that as well as everything I'm using is provided for you down below so you can easily find it. And then once again, I'm just going to go ahead with black embossing powder on the top and just sprinkle it on. I don't want all the powder to adhere where there's no line or stamped image. So I like to use these soft brushes and go over. Now, first technique, this has already been heat embossed. I am going to use some distress inks. I like using the mini distress ink pads. They fit beautifully in my little mat right here. Love that about them. And I'm just gonna take and spray a couple colors out. I'm showing you kind of how I organize my distress inks as I'm looking for what colors I want to use. Distress inks are highly water reactive, meaning you can dry them 105 times and every time you get them wet, they're going to blend, which I love. But if you don't seal them, and I'm going to show you how you can seal them, you will get mud if you are not respectful of the color family. So I like to open up my distress ink packages when I get them, pop them right into the appropriate color family container. That way I know that everything in that particular tin is going to blend beautifully. Those are my neutrals. So I have it split up with like my neutrals. So these are like the browns, some grays, some blacks. Now that I have to be careful of because some of them are cool, some of them are warm, but I really like bright colors, so I normally don't like work with that. And then I have them split up into the yellows and the oranges and reds, those are warms, and then my cools, which are the blues, and then finally the purples. And purples are all on their own. They don't like to play with anybody but themselves, and red and blue, and they have to be a true red or a true blue. So now all I did was I just, as you saw, just misted it with some water, and I'm just picking it up like paint. Now what the embossed image does is it allows those lines to get raised, and the ink will pool for the most part right where it should go. Now granted, if I use so much of my watercolor right now, my distress ink that's been watered down, it will flow over into the next section, but I have to really use a lot. And I do kind of mess up at one point, and you'll see that where it does kind of overflow into another section, but I'm not really that worried about it. If I get some grunge on a Halloween card, I'm good with it. But I am playing with a purple right there, so that if it touches anything, it's going to turn into grunge. So things I know as I play with this. And I'm just going through like you would watercolor on this. So this is one kind of ink that you can watercolor with really, really nicely. and I'll show you the other one in a minute. So as you can tell, I tried to rinse off my brush dipping between the colors, and that's simply because I knew that if I dipped from my purple, even if I thought that it was clean, into my orange, I'd end up with a muddy brown. So I did try to be a little bit careful with that. And then I go back and I decide, you know what? I think I want her arm to be a little bit green. And I also need to color in the little monkeys on the bottoms. There's more for me to do on this, but since she is a witch, I thought that it would be pretty cool to also make her arm like a tinted green. And that is what I love about Distress ink, is you can blend in colors like that and get some really fun type blends. And now I'm just going over and blending in a lot of those colors to create the final little touches on this. And now it's like, okay, I want her arm to be a little bit green. Let's kind of grunge this up a little bit. And so again, I'm just making sure, it's my paintbrush dry, and there we go. So I really like how this one turns out. All right, so for the next step, you want to make sure that your image is dry. Make sure your finger is clean. This is micro distress glaze. I know. I've had some of you guys yell at me, don't dip your finger in it. It can get mildewy and moldy. First of all, it's my product. Only I dip my finger in it. I do wash it. I don't like using the sponge tip applicators in it, you guys, because it sucks up my product way too much, and I use way too much. I like to use my finger. I feel like I have a little bit more control on that, but my finger is always clean, and it's my product. I'm not sharing that with anybody, okay? All right, now, the reason why I did that was because I want to do some ink blending on the background, but since Distress ink is such a blendable ink, meaning every time you wet it, it will start to move, which is super cool. I don't want my image that I just colored in to move. So Distress Micro Glaze on top of Distress ink actually creates a waterproof barrier. So I can, and you're going to see me, I'm going to be able to wet this down. It's not going to affect that image at all. It's going to just beat up, and it's not going to be a big deal at all. I'm going in with two different purples on this for the background, and I actually end up using a Dilutions stencil as well. And I'm not loving how splotchy that is, and so I'm going to blend it out with some water. And now I'm like, okay, now we're getting there. So then I lay down my stencil, and this time I just go over it with that darker purple. And I get a really pretty type background. And what's funny is I was trying to line up the spider web on that, and then it just dawned on me, hey, this is a stencil. I can just flip the stencil over and it'll be A-okay. Isn't that funny how we forget that we can do things like that? And of course, if it was a word stencil or something, that really wouldn't work. But for this, it's perfect. If you guys, I just want to take this opportunity to invite you, if you enjoy content like this, make sure that you subscribe to my channel, hitting that notification bell. Also, if you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. And if you know anybody that can benefit from this, please feel free to share it. Love it when you guys share. Helps me it allows me to continue to bring you free content here on YouTube when everybody participates in the making of the video go viral. Now I want to put my sentiment there, so I kind of want to loosen up that background a little bit. So I just take an old paintbrush and just dab some water on it just to get that one area to soften. Gotta tell you, it does start to do a little bit of pelting right there. And I gotta wait for it to get dry before I do slap down my sentiment, because I'm actually using Catherine Pooler's ink on this. I love her black to stamp my sentiment with, but it is a dye ink, so it will soften and get fuzzy if that's not completely dry. So I had to make sure that it's dry, and I go over it a couple times. It's the best. I love, love, love this ink for stamping my sentiments. It's gorgeous. All right, on to the next one. Now we're going to use a different kind of ink pad. We're going to use dye ink. I'm using Simon Hurley dye ink pads. His are my favorite to do this technique with. However, if you have other dye inks in your stash, they will work just as fine. I like his because of the ink pad itself. It's not, it doesn't suction cup, which is nice sometimes, like the Catherine Pooler ones. I love hers to stamp with, but to do this technique, a little bit challenging for me because it wants to stick, and there's so much ink that gets put down. So this, I feel like I have a little bit more control over how much goes down. I also like his colors. I'm using some of his newer colors right here. These are his neutrals that were necessary, I feel, in his line, though he has some absolutely gorgeous bright colors. And ironically, when I do blend out, I don't know why, but whenever I blend out his colors, if I'm not being respectful of the color family, they don't get muddy and ugly as much as some of the other ink pads I've used. And I don't know why. I don't know if they have an undertone that are all cool or all warm or what, but they just don't muddy up as much, which I really, really like. This is his new Shady. It's like a grayish black, and I like to really play with this one. If you want your color to be more transparent, then you add more water. If you want it to be more opaque, then you add less water. But this one, I'm really loose with it. And again, those embossed lines allow for my watercolor paint that I just created out of these ink pads to pool nicely where they should go. You do not want to emboss your image if you are using alcohol markers. I'm telling you, I've tried it. I don't know why. You will ruin your markers and your image. I don't understand. It just does not react well. I thought that an embossed image was, it turns into a plastic, but for some reason with my alcohol markers and embossing, they just don't play well together at all for me to color on top of an embossed line. So steer clear of that. I'm telling you that, my friends, because I don't want you to learn the hard way like I did and ruin a $8 marker, because that made me cry, and I just don't want anybody to repeat that mistake. But whenever you're using water reactive inks or a medium, totally emboss it first, and it'll allow you a little bit better control and coloring in the lines. All right, so I'm using Roar on this, and I want the little shoes to be a little bit darker, so I just went in and spotted those through. Now, for this, I'm not paying much attention on where I get that shooting star down. I'm creating a background. I love, 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 love his ink for backgrounds. This is a kid-friendly card, in my opinion, so I want it to be bright. I don't really want it to be spooky. So Simon Hurley, yep, he's the man for that. And I am paying attention to my color family. I'm using yellow and orange right there. But as you can tell, it really didn't affect the color of my image that I colored in, which is kind of awesome. Once again, I am lining up these sentiments here on my Misty, and I'm going to stamp them again with that Catherine Pooler ink pad. And I think I do it like 2 times on this, but it turns out just adorable, as you will be able to see in a moment. I love these lovely legs. Tell me, you guys, what's your favorite? Is there a favorite stamp line that you enjoy? For me, it's Lovely Legs from Colorado Craft. And No, I'm not affiliated with them at all. I don't even think they know I exist, but I love their stuff. All right, there are the 2 cards. I did go ahead. I wanted to pop on some Nuvo glitter drops. The reason why I didn't do stickles is because the Nuvo ones, and this is Purple Rain, you'll see in a minute, it keeps their height on it. Those dots won't flatten out. They'll stay nice and fluffy. And I wanted purple because, well, you know,